Ubuntu 25.04 came out recently, and it is a big release. There's a lot to talk about. We covered it in an overview on my podcast This Week in Linux, but I wanted to make this video as a much more in-depth version of that. And in addition to the updates for Ubuntu, we're also going to be talking about Ubuntu flavors, all 10 of them. Yes, if you didn't know, there's 10 of them. There's a bunch of remixes and derivatives as well, but there's 10 official flavors. So we're going to talk about all of them in this video. First up is, of course, Ubuntu itself. We're going to talk about what is new with Ubuntu specifically, but we're also going to talk about the stuff that's basically shared between all of the flavors and the main version, and that is things like the Linux kernel being updated, because this is using Linux kernel 6.14, and they're using the new Ubuntu policy to ship the latest kernel, which is available at the given time a release happens, which they started that in the last release of Ubuntu, which is great because sometimes you'd have to wait a whole other update to get the latest version of the kernel at that given time. Now, when the updates still happen with the kernel, because the kernel moves much faster, it's about 6 weeks than 6 months with Ubuntu. And so obviously there's going to be some delay in those kinds of things. But it used to be you'd have to wait even longer, and now you can get the latest at the time of the Ubuntu release, which is awesome. So the Linux 6.14 is that kernel, and it brings various improvements like NT Sync for gaming, ButterFS RAID 1 read balancing, better GPU memory management, and IO U-ring-based fuse support, as well as many more. If you learn more about the Linux 6.4 release, you can check the links in the show notes for more details. And also, there's going to be a lot of those links. So if you want more details on anything we cover, there's probably going to be a link in the description. Go check it out. They've made some massive updates to the installer. There's better dual boot support. They have a new replace Ubuntu option, which is basically kind of like a refresh to factory settings kind of thing, and many more improvements. Ubuntu 25.04 also comes with the latest version of the GNOME desktop. So GNOME 48 comes with a lot of new features, including the biggest one probably being the HDR support. And there's also some other ones like notification stacking that just makes it easier to manage your notifications in your system tray, which, I mean, there's not necessarily a system tray. That's a whole other kind of topic. But they also have the well-being features, which is like screen time controls. So you can have it notify you when you need to take a break and, look at something other than a screen. And maybe go out and touch grass, as people say, although that's very overrated in my opinion. There's also a visual refresh with this latest release. There's some updates to the icons. Also, the contrast has been enhanced, as well as a new wallpaper. Plus, there's a new document viewer app, so they have replaced the events viewer with the papers viewer, or GNOME Papers, as well as doing some updates to the geolocation system. So they use Beacon DB for the powering of the nightlight features and the time zone features. There's also a lot of updates to the graphics stack. So Mesa 25.0.x series has been added to this release. And also there's been improvements in support for Intel Arc Xe and also the Battlemage dedicated GPUs. And also for the NVIDIA users out there, you're going to get some updates as well, because NVIDIA Dynamic Boost is now supported and enabled for compatible laptops. They've also improved security handling for various apps with new profile updates for App Armor, as well as a new unified ARM64 ISO, which will make it work with Snapdragon X Elite laptops, which is very cool. They also have support for JPEG XL out of the box, and also apt. Apt has been updated to 3.0, introducing a new dependency solver that kicks in automatically when the classic solver can't find a solution, and a lot of other features with the new version of apt 3.0. So if you are already using Ubuntu 24.10, upgrading to 25.04, you might want to hold off just a little longer. Upgrades to Ubuntu 25.04 have been temporarily suspended due to issues that have been identified in the Ubuntu-release-upgrader, which includes removal of foreign packages and boot failures on some desktops. So if you attempt to force an upgrade right now, you might encounter major problems like a non-booting system, broken dependencies, or failed upgrade process. So unfortunately, upgrading to Plucky Puffin right now could pluck out some necessary packages. Now, they are working on fixing these issues, and it's already in the works to address these things. So upgrades are expected to be re-enabled pretty soon. We don't know exactly when, but fairly soon. And as they say, stuff happens. Stuff happens. But let me take this opportunity to reiterate something that will never stop being good advice. Make backups, and then make backups of those backups, and then make backups of the backups of your backups. Okay, you get the idea. Make backups of your data, because that's the only way to make sure you won't lose anything. Because upgrades can go bad, new packages of different applications can go wonky. Things can happen. It's computers, it's not perfect, stuff happens. So make backups, and you won't have to care if something goes wrong. You'll have everything you need and just, reset in that sense. So anyway, this is a good release, but there are some issues you might want to wait before you upgrade to this release if you're already using Ubuntu or a flavor of Ubuntu, because it's not just Ubuntu or specific flavors. It's all of them have been suspended at the moment. Although not all the flavors have had issues in the upgrades, it's just, just in case kind of thing, where they might as well suspend everything to make sure they get everything fixed up before they activate it again. Now let's take a look at the official flavors. And first up, we're going to talk about Kubuntu. Kubuntu 25.04 has a lot of updates. In fact, the whole desktop is updated and a bunch of apps have been updated. And the Kubuntu team have been working hard to ship the latest release. And it's coming with the Qt6 based Plasma 6.3 KDE desktop. And they have it with the latest version of 6.3.4. which is the fourth and latest bug fix release for Plasma 6.3 at the time of release. Plasma Wayland session is also the default option in the login manager for this particular release, but if you want, you can also use X11. You can switch back to it by logging out and choosing X11 if for some reason you need to. And of course, all of the KDE apps have been updated to the latest at the time, which was KDE Gear 24.12. Now, unfortunately, the same week that Kubuntu 25.04 came out, a new version of KDE Gear came out, but of course, a day or two is not enough time to be able to get all of those applications updated for the latest release. So those will come out in a future version of Kubuntu. But you do have all the ones that were updated for 24.12, which is still a lot of improvements. So that's great. Lubuntu 25.04 has also had a release, of course, and they have said that their primary goals for this release was to stabilize, refine, and refresh. So stabilizing, they wanted to focus on reducing bugs and increasing reliability. And with refinement, they want to work on the Calamares installer modules, which they did. And also with refreshing, they're trying to do a major focus on porting the Qt or Qt 5 to Qt 6. So this is a big undertaking, and they are preparing for full Wayland support. In fact, they're saying that Qt 6 is now used in most applications, and the default to Wayland is planned to be happening in 25.10. So it is available to use if you want to, in terms of it's not default, but they are working in the sense to have that in the next release, which is very cool. Lubuntu also has switched to the fancy menu in this version of their release. And the fancy menu is basically a more modern style menu related to the LXQt desktop, which is great. And I think this is a huge improvement to the very out of date of the older menu that used to come with LXQt. This was a much needed update, so I'm happy to see it. Edubuntu is the education-based version of Ubuntu's flavors, and they have 25.04 out, and it has been upgraded to GNOME 48. Now, a lot of the stuff with the Edubuntu is basically the same as Ubuntu proper. They're very similar. It's just like what comes out of the box different is the main thing. So there's applications specifically for educational purposes and that sort of stuff. So they've replaced a few apps that were deprecated upstream, and they've also introduced some new theme support for Qt or Qt-based applications in this release of Edubuntu. Ubuntu Budgie 25.04 is out, and it is packed with changes, including big moves towards Wayland, updated themes, and a few surprises. First up, Ubuntu Budgie is making a major leap towards Wayland. The team has made excellent progress toward converting the distro to a Wayland-based system, and 25.04 PPA will soon be available for the community to test and provide feedback for that Wayland support. Thunderbird is no longer going to be included by default. So this is the few surprises kind of thing. And users can now select an email client during setup using the new email ballot page. So if you want to use Thunderbird, you still can, or you could use something else. Ubuntu Budgie 25.04 adds cursor options, also updates the various different themes with some new contributions from new team members, which is always nice to see new team members joining. Also, the Budgie menu applet now shows terminal applications in it, and also the Showtime applet correctly displays across multiple monitors if you have more than one monitor, which is always nice to see improvements for multi-monitor support because I have quite a few. Ubuntu Budgie also has a new application called Waycheck, which is designed to show which Wayland protocols are supported by your compositor. So Waycheck is a valuable tool for developers who are testing or building applications on Wayland, making Ubuntu Budgie even more attractive for advanced users. So if you wanted to make applications, you could use Waycheck to do that. I'm sure you could probably just install Waycheck from other desktops or other distros, but this is very cool that you can do that because it makes it a lot easier to see, what compatibility is available with your application and if you need to go and change things. Ubuntu Cinnamon 25.04 moves from Cinnamon 6.0.4 to Cinnamon 6.4.8, featuring some modernized interface for the UI. It's actually a lot more improved from the previous versions of Cinnamon because there's a lot of theming changes and stuff like that. Also, profile pictures in the user applet has been added, as well as nightlight configuration, and also numpad support for menu navigation. These updates polish the desktop experience and make everyday usage just that much more smooth. Cinnamon Control Center, Screensaver, Settings Daemon, CJS, Muffin, and Nemo have all been updated to the latest 6.4 versions, which brings improvements like new audio selection dialogues and better monitor labeling. They've also decided to remove some various different packages, including language packs that were, you can add them for yourself if you want to, but they wanted to reduce the image size for the ISO. And also they have replaced Alacrity with GNOME Terminal, and NeoFetch has been swapped out for FastFetch. And this is because NeoFetch is no longer maintained, and FastFetch is kind of like the replacement for it. Now, also the minimal installations will have a lot of different changes to it. They're going to be removing some various apps, including Events, GNOME Disk Utility, GNOME Font Viewer, and also GNOME Photos, as well as the Nemo Archive Manager extension and the Synaptic Package Manager. So if you need those, you can manually add them yourself, but by default, if you choose the minimal installation, it will not come with those anymore. Of course, you can still use the normal installation and get all of those if you want to. Next up, we have Ubuntu Kylin or Kylin 25.04, and it continues refining the UK UI desktop environment, which is their own desktop environment that they make for this particular flavor. And this has personalization options to fit different workflows and various different preferences that you can customize. It also has a customizable, basically everything is really cool in this one because it's very flexible and it's really nice looking, and it makes Ubuntu Kylin stand out, especially for users looking for an elegant and more efficient looking interface. Next up, we have Ubuntu MATE 25.04, and this is a big release, especially for just celebratory reasons, because Ubuntu MATE 25.04 is the 10th anniversary of Ubuntu MATE becoming an official Ubuntu flavor, celebrating a decade of offering a traditional desktop experience with modern capabilities. So for those who don't know, MATE is based on the GNOME 2 desktop. It's actually a continuation of the GNOME 2 desktop that's been modernized with new toolkits and updates to various different settings and features and all that sort of stuff. So for those who don't know the history, basically GNOME created GNOME 2 and then decided in 2011 to no longer maintain GNOME 2, and they switched to GNOME 3, which was controversial at the time, very controversial. And then they made another separate project, decided to fork GNOME 2 and then create MATE from that. And since then, MATE has vastly evolved into what it is now. And this is really cool because also Ubuntu MATE has its 10th anniversary of being an official flavor with this release. And this version introduces optional full disk encryption, enhanced advanced partitioning options, better handling of BitLocker-enabled Windows installations, and improved dual boot experience with the new installer stuff. Also, there's a lot of updated core apps to ensure better performance, and it comes with various security improvements out of the box with this release of Ubuntu MATE. Ubuntu Studio 25.04 is available with this release, of course. And also, for those who are not familiar, Ubuntu Studio is kind of like the content creation production style. Like, it could be audio creation, video production, it could be graphic design, all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of cool applications that are there by default and a lot of configurations done for you. Now, Ubuntu Studio used to be very different than what it is now. It used to be Xfce based. It is now KDE Plasma based. I mean, they changed that a while ago. It's not just this release. But this means that they have a lot of interconnection and collaboration with the Kubuntu desktop team because they have the same desktop that is built into Kubuntu. They also have upgraded Pipewire to 1.2.7. The KDE Plasma desktop is upgraded to 6.3.3. And KDE Frameworks is upgraded to 6.12. Qt has been updated to 6.8. And of course, the KDE Gear apps have the same 24.12 set. If you're interested in this kind of thing where you have the various different production tools and applications already available for you, Ubuntu Studio is definitely something to check out. But they have something on their notes, on their release notes, that I think is interesting because I kind of talked about it in my previous video about Fedora. But since they put it in the release notes, I wanted to just reiterate it a little bit. And that is related to TLP, or Tuned for Linux Power. Now, a lot of people will see TLP being suggested on articles and guides and even videos talking about how you should switch to TLP. And the release notes for Ubuntu Studio 25.04 says that installing TLP will result in a conflict against Power Profiles daemon, which is installed in Ubuntu Studio. Power Profiles daemon is required by the KDE Plasma desktop environment and is the preferred choice for power management on Ubuntu Studio. Uninstalling it will result in an uninstallation of Ubuntu Studio Desktop Core, which may result in auto removal of the entire desktop environment. That is an important note. Now, in other distributions, TLP is highly recommended because it's been recommended for many, many years because it's been around for a long time. And some people just think that it's always going to be a valid suggestion, but it's not really anymore. Power Profiles daemon can basically optimize the power efficiency of your distribution pretty much the same. You can even configure it in certain ways with various different profiles and that sort of thing. But for the most part, you don't have to do anything except switch on what setting you want to use, whether you want to be power optimized for power, optimized for battery, and all that sort of stuff. You can just choose it built into the system now. Whereas TLP is more for Lenovo-specific hardware, like ThinkPads and that sort of thing, but also more for older hardware of Lenovo, so like 8 years or more. So you really don't need TLP. You can just skip it entirely, and hopefully soon these articles and videos will stop recommending TLP for those who don't need it, which is most people. Ubuntu Unity 25.04 is next, and it is a very cool flavor of Ubuntu. It's basically the old version of Ubuntu from the 2016 era up until 2017, because like 17.04 is when they stopped doing Unity inside of the Ubuntu proper. And this update is not really that much. The release notes are kind of sparse, but I wanted to cover it anyway because Ubuntu Unity is still a cool project. And Unity is a very nice desktop environment. In fact, I think it's one of the best back in the day and still pretty solid for no longer being a core product of Canonical. It is still a very good desktop environment. And also the changes that happened in Unity 7, which was released, 7.7 was one of the latest ones. And it changed a lot. It cleaned up a lot of the look, modernized it and all sorts of stuff. So I think it's a much cleaner than the older versions of Unity. So this is a really nice flavor if you're interested in checking out the more traditional Ubuntu stuff, but also still a unique desktop if you're new to Linux. So I think Ubuntu Unity is a really good flavor, especially for those who are looking for that kind of thing, because it's a unique workflow. In fact, the heads-up display or the HUD and the global menu are very cool. I made a video a long time ago about this, and I kind of hesitate to link it in the description because it's very old. I did not have as good a microphone or any equipment, so I might just make a new one talking about why I like Unity, like the old stuff, rather than literally linking to you to the old video. I don't really want to. If you find it, then you find it, but I don't really want to look for a link to it. Last but not least is Xubuntu 25.04, and this is coming with Xfce 4.20, which has a lot of updates, but it also includes some updates related to GNOME 48 and MATE 126. We'll get to those in a second, but Xfce 4.20 was released in December 2024, so this will be the first version of Xubuntu that will have the latest version of Xfce 4.20, which features many bug fixes, various different improvements over like the overall core system, modernization of the Xubuntu desktop, while also maintaining a familiar look and feel, and also early Wayland support has been added to the latest release of Xfce 4.20. However, that's not going to be available in Xubuntu because it's pretty much experimental at this point, so I didn't really want to ship experimental stuff, which is understandable. Xfce 4.20, everything else is available with this release of Xubuntu. GNOME 48 apps are tightly integrated with Xubuntu and have full support for dark mode, so this latest release gets updates to all that sort of stuff. And users of QEMU and KVM will be delighted to find new stability with the desktop session because the long-running X server crash has been resolved in Xubuntu 25.04 and has been also backported to all of the currently supported Xubuntu releases, which is fantastic. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is absolutely not relevant to this release whatsoever. It's about the next release, and that is Ubuntu 25.10, because they have given the code name. And I know for those who have checked out the latest episode of Twill, I already talked about this. You can skip ahead if you want to. But this is a new code name of Questing Quokka. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I almost never talk about the code names because they don't, whatever. But this is good because the Quokka is the most adorable animal on the planet. It is super adorable. It's a tiny little marsupial that only lives in a particular island off of Australia, and it is adorable. And it's so adorable that it also loves taking selfies. That's right. It loves taking selfies with people, which is just so awesome. And I was happy to see that they picked it because I have been wanting them to do it for this release for 13 years. I mean, specifically for this release because there's 26 letters in the alphabet, and they do 2 releases a year. So I had to wait 13 years for the next Q to come out. But I found out the Quokka existed because of the code names for Ubuntu back in 2012 when they were asking people to guess what it was going to be. And I was disappointed when it wasn't Quokka. Now, the Quantal Quetzal, not a bad code name. The Quetzal is a cool looking bird. I'll give you that. But the Quokka is adorable. So I'm happy about this way more than I should be. But there you go. Now you know what a Quokka is. Now, there are some things to note here with the latest release of Ubuntu, and that this is not an LTS or long-term support release. Those happen only in the April months of the even number years. I know it sounds weird, but it's just every 2 years. So 2404 is the latest LTS. 2604 next year will be an LTS as well. So that means you're going to get 9 months of support, which means that you will need to upgrade to future releases. So 2510, when it comes out, you will need to upgrade. And that's not a big deal because upgrades are expected to happen every 6 months. But there's like a 3-month window for those to be done. But it is worth noting that this particular release of Ubuntu, there are some upgrade issues. That's it for this release of Ubuntu 25.04. I think this is a very solid release. There's a lot of improvements, especially with the latest and greatest Linux kernel and the latest and greatest Mesa drivers and so much more, as well as all the different flavors have a lot of improvements. Now, not all of the flavors have a ton of improvements. A lot of it is mostly like evolution of the system and just improving, polishing, and that sort of stuff, and stabilizing the reliability. But that's always great too. So solid release all around by the Ubuntu team and the Ubuntu Flavours teams. Just fantastic job. The week that Ubuntu released this 25.04 was just massive because the same week, just 2 days before, Fedora decided that Fedora 42 also needed to be released. So I made a video about that. If you want to learn more about Fedora, you can check it out right here. And also I made a follow-up video about the 9 things you should do after installing Fedora, which is right here. And you can check out either one of these or both of them. In fact, they're both great videos. This one is kind of like making Fedora more beginner friendly. So if you're interested in that, check it out.